The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
And welcome to Autism Live. I am Shannon Penrod, and I am a proud pony. That is a parent of a neurodiverse individual. In fact, we're debuting this show on June 5th, 2024. So if you're watching the show, I am not actually here because it is my son's 21st birthday. So I am spending the day with him, but I wanted to do something here on the show that I felt was important. If it's his 21st birthday, I want to talk about something that's important. And so I wanted to talk about diet. And so today is one of those parent-to-parent talks where I'm going to go through a bunch of diets. I'm going to go through them quickly and then go back and talk about them in more depth. But I think it's really important that we consider diet in every conversation that we're having. And I'm happy to talk about that at length. But let's start by, first of all, welcoming you. We do like interaction, and I will look at the comments later. I'll look at them tomorrow because today I'm with my son and I'm not even going to turn on internet. But we're premiering right now on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter. Chris is going to start to show you on the screen some of the different ways that you could participate. You can be talking to each other, and as I said, I will go in and look at comments later on. If you want to say happy birthday to my son, you can. I will show them to him later on. We've got a full day planned, and then we're going to the theater this evening for a Broadway show, but here in Los Angeles. So it's not really Broadway, but it's Broadway. And then a bar. We're going to a bar. I don't drink, but we're going to a bar. So there we go. It should be hilarious. I will be the designated driver. All right. But anyway, so write in comments if you want to say happy birthday to my son. Don't forget, we're live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter right now, and then later on the show will be podcasts for perpetuity so that I can embarrass my son when he's 38. Show him the video where we talked about going to a bar when he's 21. I don't know how that would embarrass him, but anyway. When you download us, because we're a free podcast wherever you get your podcasts, but there is a cost that happens when you download. It's free to you, but there is a cost. That's why we have sponsors. And so you will hear advertisements on the podcast. I hope you will embrace them with your full heart because that's what's making it free for you. However, if you would like to experience the podcast without ads, we have a way for you to do that as well by going to glow.fm/autism-live. When you go there, they will put your credit card and $5 a month. They will exchange that for an ad-free version of absolutely everything that we put out from Autism Network. That's everything on Autism Live, everything on Ask Dr. Doreen, all the newer podcasts. It's absolutely everything, and you get it ad-free automatically. glow.fm/autism-live. Okay. So there is all of that. Let's start to talk about diet, shall we? Because this is a pretty key thing. Let's go ahead on to our next slide there. We have to do a disclaimer here because, obviously, I am not a doctor or a nutritionist. It's important to do your own research and talk with your medical professionals, of course. Everybody is different. There is no one perfect diet for everyone. I have parents often at a conference, they'll say, okay, I can only do one diet. What is the only, what's the one diet? And I don't like how there is no one diet that's good for all of us, right? Anyway, so, and then I'm really blind today. I need you to full screen it for me again, Chris, because I have no idea what the fourth disclaimer is. Oh, nothing in this presentation is meant to represent medical advice. Okay, that sounds very disclaimer-ish, doesn't it? Because it is. Right. This is a parent-to-parent talk. Just to be completely clear, that's what it's meant to be. When we do parent-to-parent talks, It's meant to be like if we were sitting and having coffee and I just have had an experience, I'm going to tell you what it is. You tell me what your experience is, and then you decide what you're gonna do. So not a doctor. Don't even play one on the internet. Yeah. But we've been through a bunch of different diets with my son and with myself because I have a significant amount of gastro issues and plagued my life. So anyway, we're going to talk about these diets and see why they may or may not be of interest to you. So let's head on to our first one. So, and this is also a basis for everything that we are going to talk about in this. So I said food for thought. That I love Lisa Ackerman from Talk is the first person that I ever heard say this. And I didn't understand what she meant the first time she said it. She said garbage in, garbage out. And basically what that means is let's have some consideration of what we're putting into our bodies and into our children. Because if we expect high level things to come out, then we would only put high level things in, right? Because nutrition matters. And I stand by this. What you digest does affect what you think, how you communicate, learn, react, feel. It absolutely does. I love, is it Louise Hay who used to say that what you think becomes what you say, becomes what you do. What you think becomes what you say, becomes what you do. So your thoughts have an effect on everything that you do. And I remember thinking, that's a powerful, powerful statement, right? But how about what you ingest? What you put in your mouth and swallow also has an effect on what you think, what you say, what you do, how you feel. And I remember that there was a time and a place when my son was diagnosed and this was hotly debated because it gets hotly debated like every 8-10 years, right? And a lot of people, the first books, Karen Sorosi's book came out about diet and the gluten-free diet, and then Jenny McCarthy said something about diet. And I remember somebody that I had previously really respected said, that's ridiculous. That, what the type of bread that you eat has absolutely nothing to do with this child's autism whatsoever. And I loved that Jenny McCarthy came back and said, how could you make a sweeping statement like that? Who are you, a man of science or not? If we were to give this child a beer, do you not think that how they interpret the world and how they communicate would change? So if that's true, can't that be true of other substances as well? I thought that was brilliant. Chalk up one for Jenny McCarthy. And it really reminded me that when I eat certain things, I don't feel well. And that changes how I react to the world and what I'm capable of. So if you do not agree with that type of thinking, that what you eat affects how you feel, this is going to be a rough conversation for you today. And I feel for you, but I would ask you to consider, do you just have a steel stomach and you can eat absolutely anything? And I guess that there are some people that are like that, but I don't think so. I don't think so. I love my one roommate who was like, I love to fly. Flying is fun and I never get sick flying. And then she would always say that. We'd get on the plane and I would go, oh, I'm a terrible flyer. And I always get car sick and I don't, right? And I would be fine the whole ride. And I would be holding the barf bag for her because she threw up every single time we rode on a plane together. I think sometimes people just go, no, but I love this and it doesn't affect me because they love eating that thing and they aren't noticing that they spend the next 2 days in the bathroom. I don't know. I could be wrong. I'm not a doctor or a nutritionist. But anyway, let's run through the different diets really quickly so we just know which diets we're talking about for those of you who have to be someplace quickly. And then we'll go back and talk about all of them. All right. So first of all, low pesticide diet. And, I'm a big, huge fan of this. Notice I didn't say no pesticide because I'm being a realist now, but low pesticide diet. And if you have someone in your life that you love that is having issues with focus or ADHD, I gave you a link there to go and look at why low pesticide diet. We'll talk about this more in a second. Let's go on to the next one. Oh, GFCF, the gluten-free, casein-free diet. Yes, a lot of people, not everybody, find that there is a good bang for their buck there. So we'll talk about that and the opiate effect. The Finegold diet. Now, this is a diet that we had not been talking about very much, but it was I think it was one that helped my son. So we're going to talk about that. And a modified Finegold. Let's go on to the next one. The specific carbohydrate diet. We're going to talk about that. Notice all these colorful things that I put pictures of, which are things you don't eat on that diet. Okay, let's move on to the next one. We're going to talk about the keto diet and why there is a resurgence of people thinking that keto might be helpful with autism-related issues. Let's go on to the next one. The GAPS diet. Ooh, we haven't talked about that in a good little while. That's a very specific, intense, I'll say that, diet. Let's go on to the next one. The low oxalate diet. Yes, and I think, have we got one more or is that it? Yes, everyone is different. Okay, so again, disclaimer, everyone is different. So one might be better, but you'll see that a lot of these have overlap. And then there are a couple of standalone in different diets where there are specific things that you have to eliminate that you wouldn't with the other ones. So let's go all the way back now to the low pesticide diet. Let's talk about this because this makes me full on crazy that I didn't know this at a certain point in time in my life. What you see on the screen there, I suggest taking a screenshot of it. This is an overview for a whole bunch of studies, and the date on it, I think, is 2011. That there were a bunch of studies that came out, and so this is an overview of all the studies that came out showing the different degree that pesticides have on ADHD and autism behaviors. Okay, so let's back the bus up for a second because it was 2011 when I first came to work doing autism-live. And there was a gentleman who I was working with who at one point, we were talking about autism, and he was like, well, but the pesticide thing. And I was like, what? Like, it so was not on my radar. And then every time we'd be in a conversation, he would bring up the pesticide thing. And I just kept looking. I said, what are you talking about, the pesticide thing? And he was like, you didn't see the new study that just came out? And so the next day, there it was on my desk. And basically, it was a study about organophosphates, which is a type of pesticide, and about what organophosphates do. And I was full down the rabbit hole after this. And basically, I always thought, I like to be a wordsmith and think about words. What do they mean and what do they do? So pesticide, pest, which is bug, side is kill. Pesticides kill bugs. Pesticides don't kill people, right? Because if they did, there are some pesticides that kill people and they have the big, signs on them with the skull and the crossbones and it's poison, and we would never feed that to a child, nor would we put that on a vegetable or a fruit and give it to a child, right? Everybody knows this. That would be barbaric. That would be inhumane. So what's the big deal with pesticides? And I read about organophosphates. Guess what? They don't kill bugs. A lot of the pesticides that are used commercially in the United States right now do not actually kill bugs. What they do, they are neurotransmitter disruptors. But that doesn't look good on a bottle, right? Not even just bug, neurotransmitter disruptor. If you were looking on a shelf and it said, buy Raid, neurotransmitter disruptor, would you buy that? Because wouldn't you think, well, wait a second, if this is disrupting the neurotransmitter of the bug, is it doing it to my child? And guess what the answer is from the research? Yes, it is. It most certainly is. So the study looked at it a little bit further and said that if you put a certain amount of pesticide on for the bugs, and bugs are little bugs, right? You put a certain amount of neurotransmitter on it, and what it'll do is it distracts them, It distracts them so they don't eat. And what ends up happening is they die of starvation. Excuse me, what? It causes them to not be able to focus on the things that they should focus on for survival. That's what it does to the bugs. If you pile more pesticide on that is required, first of all, you put a little bit on, it's going to disrupt them. You put a little bit more on and it makes them hyperactive. It makes their legs move more so that they are even more distracted and they die quicker from the starvation. Oh, excuse me? And then if you pile even more on, it will disrupt to the point where their legs move faster and faster and faster to the point where the brain can't keep up and they lock up and freeze. And now their legs don't move and they become catatonic and they cannot eat and they die. This is how these pesticides kill bugs. And of course, you start to go, ooh, this doesn't sound good. I would not give that to my child. And they looked specifically at children in 2011. And the pesticide load in their body. First of all, we know that if you are around pesticides, not necessarily ingesting them, around pesticides and or ingesting them, your body eliminates it, right? It is something that's not productive, so it eliminates it through the urine. And we can see, you feed a child something with pesticide residue, they pee a few hours later, and we can see that residue in their urine. Direct correlation between these two things, the amount of pesticide in your body and the amount of pesticide in your urine. Okay, so they decided to take that and go, let's play a little bit with this and see it. Let's have behaviorists chart behaviors and compare with the amount of pesticide in the urine. And in all of the kids, depending on the amount of pesticide residue in their urine, it did directly correlate to more ADHD behaviors, more fidgeting, less ability to focus, all the things that we don't want for our kiddos directly correlated to the amount of pesticide residue in their urine. When you hear that, it's very hard to go back, right? So I really recommend a low pesticide diet for our kiddos. Again, I don't say no because I think that that's unrealistic, right? I was just at a nursery yesterday, was going to buy some organic bean plants and they didn't have any. And I said, you don't have any organic ones? And the guy said, well, we have the conventional ones and they're not really any different. And I said, don't tell me that. And he said, no, there's stuff on everything. And I was like, stop, I don't want to hear that. But I asked specifically and he said, well, if it's certified organic, that means that we can't do, and he went through and I went, yeah, I want at least that. Give me that. So I know sometimes it's really hard to do a low pesticide diet because you feel like your life is out of control and you're someplace and it's like, I needed to get something to eat. And there are some easy guidelines that the Environmental Working Group does, something called the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. And basically they do studies every year because every year agriculturally it changes. Sometimes there's a blight on apples, that there's some apple fly that comes and they're decimating crops. And in order to save the economy and save the crops, they'll end up spraying, right? And so conventional apples that year have tons more pesticide on it because there was some sort of apple fly blight, right? Whereas other years, if they don't need the pesticide, they don't put it on, right? So I always have it at the ready. And it's funny because I was at the store the other day and there were just a bunch of things I couldn't get organic strawberries. I was like, what is the deal with why are there no fresh organic strawberries? I was at Whole Foods Market. They didn't have a single organic fresh strawberry. And I thought, well, let me pull out the Clean 15 and look it up because maybe it's on the Clean 15 list. It wasn't. It was at the very top of the Dirty Dozen. And you know what that said to me? We're not getting strawberries today. Or we're getting frozen strawberries, frozen organic strawberries. Because when it's on the Dirty Dozen, that's a line you should draw for yourself. If you look every year and go, okay, here is the Dirty Dozen for this year, and take a picture of it on your phone so you can refer to it, put it on your refrigerator, whatever. And those are the ones that I say to myself, we're not having that, if at all possible. That means that a lot of times peppers are on there, and I go to a restaurant, and unless they specify that their peppers are organic, I don't have that dish. I know that seems like it's really, really extreme, right? Except that in the summer of 2011, after I was shown this information, I made the decision that for my son and I, my husband, you know, I could tell him whatever. I wasn't going to change his diet. But for my son and I, and whenever I was cooking in the house, we were going to go as low pesticide as we could possibly afford, as low pesticide as we could possibly, make it happen. And I want to tell you that the change in both my son and I was extreme. Extreme. I will say that for both of us, we experienced, my feet got very sweaty. I know this is TMI, but I'm not a real expensive shoe kind of girl. But I was wearing a pair of shoes, again, not the most expensive pair of shoes, but they were, a decent pair of shoes, and it was warm outside and my feet were sweating, and all, if all the toxic stuff comes out of the bottom of your feet, and my shoes melted off of my feet. I literally was walking, and then my feet were not in the shoes anymore, but I felt better. And I could focus better. And we saw a marked difference in my son, in his ability to focus, and his ability to sit still as a result that summer. I remember our team was like, what's going on? What are you doing? And when he went back to school in the fall, the teacher commented and said, boy, there was a lot of growing up that happened over the summer. And I attribute that to the low pesticide. So, and I will tell you that there have been times where we don't follow it, where we just are like, oh, we're out, we're vacationing, we're doing whatever. But there's a specific restaurant that I will not bring up that we used to eat at all the time. And we stopped eating there because of this low pesticide diet. And every time, I think there's been 4 times in the last 12 years when we've gone, because it was just faster. And it was like, let's just go there. And I get a salad there. And my son refuses to eat there anymore. He says, my stomach hurts so bad afterwards. I can't eat there anymore. So low pesticide, I think it's honestly one of the easiest things to do if you just know because if you know what the Dirty Dozen is and you don't do those, but you know what the Clean 15 is, and then you can buy those conventionally. If you just know what those things are, easy enough to do. I'm not saying you have to do the whole thing, no pesticide, but if you can wipe out the Dirty Dozen, I think it would be a different experience for you and your kids, and you'll know that you're going to be healthier. Because that whole neurotransmitter thing, it jams me up, literally. And I don't want to participate in that, and I don't want my kid participating in that. So low pesticide, I'm a huge fan. In fact, I'm such a big deal about this that when people come to me now and say, what diet should I start? And I go, that one. And speaking of my husband is someone who really tends not to notice a whole lot, but loves chocolate pudding. Chocolate pudding is his favorite thing. And all I did was I changed the milk in his chocolate pudding to organic. I did nothing else. Same pudding brand, same, it was the mix, the instant mix. All I did was change the milk. I didn't change the percentage on the milk. I just changed the milk to organic. And my husband was like, what is up with the pudding? Why does the pudding taste so much better? And I was like, really? Really, does the pudding taste better? It's organic. And he was like, stop it. You're kidding me. That is crazy. And by the way, organic milk, if you're doing milk, it stays like you think it's a mistake. You go to buy the milk and the date that it says on it, you're like, it can't possibly be. It's like 2 months from now. It stays fresher longer. There you go. Tell me why we have the pesticides? I don't know. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Let's talk about the GFCF, because this is the next one that I usually bring up to people and go, okay, if you're interested in diet, I tell them, let's get as low pesticide as possible. And then definitely this one and probably the next one are the next things that I talk about. So gluten-free, casein-free diet. And really what we're talking about here is something to prevent the opiate effect. That if you look at a slide, I can't believe I'm going to say this. If you look at a slide of a peptide of gluten and a peptide of casein and a peptide of opium, they look almost identical. There's just like one little part at the end of the peptide that is slightly different. So sometimes there is a syndrome called leaky gut syndrome, which means that there is a part of the protein in the gluten and in the dairy that doesn't get fully processed in the body. And goes directly into the bloodstream in a way that we wouldn't ideally love, and we get this opiate effect. So what does this mean when you're feeding a child things like pizza with that has gluten in the crust and cheese in the casein in the cheese? Well, again, if we went back to a child and we took a 2-year-old baby and regularly were feeding them beer, how would we expect that to affect their ability to add language? Because language, in the way that it is typically developed, it's kind of like osmosis, right? That the child's in their environment and they're just picking up sounds and they're interpreting sounds and they're trying out sounds and they're realizing, oh, I can say cookie and I get a cookie, right? For most kids in that typical development arc, we're not doing a lot of, this is a cookie, say cookie, right? We tend to do that with our kiddos who aren't picking it up through osmosis. But if you think about that, if you gave someone an opiate effect so that they were a little bit fuzz, a little bit buzz, a little bit, I don't really know what's happening, it would be hard to pick things up through osmosis. So I can only tell you that when my son, first we started him for 1 week on the gluten-free diet, and then a week later we started him on a casein-free diet. And again, that means you're not going to be having milk. So casein is more than just milk, but it means you're not going to be having dairy products, almost all dairy products. And some things that don't appear to have dairy have casein in them. Strange things that you wouldn't expect, like sometimes a juice box has a small amount of casein in it. I know. Who decided that? But so what's the point? Why would you do gluten-free, casein-free diet? The bang for the buck is that a lot of us saw that our kids became more aware, that they were a little bit less. I used to say that my son was like a happy little drunken elf. Right? So he was a little bit more aware. He was sharper. That led to him having an explosion of language that was not happening while he was on gluten-free, casein free diet. The other thing, oddly enough, because I am allergic to wheat, and when I have wheat, I'm like a child throwing a tantrum. I am mad, and I cannot tell you why I'm mad. I guess it's more like a meltdown. I'm upset. I know now as an adult when I've had an infraction and I'll go, I don't feel right. And I can feel like my temperature goes up and it feels like there's hackles underneath my arm that are pushing up. And I am mad about everything, right? That's how I am on gluten. So I expected that the gluten was going to take away the tantrums for my son because he was throwing these wild tantrums. I didn't find that. I'm going to tell you that I found the exact opposite, that the casein, getting rid of that, helped with the tantrums. And that's really interesting because a million years ago, and I think it was 1984, 86, Dr. Phil Donahue did a show way back when, but I remember seeing it. It made the national news, I think because it was a little bit bordering on unethical. There were a group of parents that had their kiddos, and they knew that their kids were milk sensitive. And of course, this was, got milk. Everybody's pushing milk all the time, 24/7, and you have to feed your child tons of milk in order for your child to grow good bones. All this stuff, right? And a group of parents were saying, except that milk is not good for all kids. And so they went on the Dr. Phil show, having told Dr. Phil this. The kids were all sitting there. The kids are all happy. They're up on the stage. Everybody's being interviewed. The parents are talking about what they're talking about. Then they went to a commercial break and they gave all of the kids milk. And they knew that these kids were milk sensitive. Now, this is the questionable ethical part. But the parents decided to do it, and the show decided to do it to show the world what a milk reaction looks like. And it's worth looking up on YouTube. It is, but it's upsetting because the kids are inconsolable. They're having meltdowns, and it's pretty instantaneous because they went to commercial, had the milk, you come back, and the kids are all crying, and you can't fake that. You know what I mean? But it was really eye-opening to a lot of us back in the 80s. We were like, oh, well, milk isn't necessarily great for everyone. I definitely saw with my son that if he had a milk infraction, we were having tons and tons and tons of behaviors. Now he's older. He's an adult, and sometimes he chooses to have gluten and casein. But he will tell you if he has too much dairy that the stomach area is not his happy place. Now, so as an adult, he can tell you that he's like, I got a little agita, I had some cheese, not feeling the best right now. And he can make that choice for himself as an adult. But what does that look like in a child? So if a child is having those kinds of feelings, maybe they're having a meltdown as a way of saying, I don't feel good, right? So I really think that it's worthwhile to try the gluten-free, casein-free diet, but here's some of the things that you need to know. I said yesterday or day before yesterday that gluten-free doesn't mean healthy. So it's really important. I see a lot of people are like, oh, there's this fabulous thing that's like a Twinkie, but it's gluten-free, or there's gluten-free Oreo now, and it makes it sound like it's all free and there's no calories and it doesn't have anything else that may not be advantageous for your child. I would say that almost all gluten-free things that are worth eating that are bought commercially are highly processed. So you're getting some other ingredients as well, and you want to be very cautious about that. Be very, very careful. We every now and then you want a treat, and I know I have bought the gluten-free donuts, and that can be a very fun thing, but don't make it a staple in the diet. It's not good for your kiddos. And keep an eye on what the other ingredients are and be choosy about that. Same thing with the casein-free diet. We had to be very inventive back in the day because they weren't selling stuff. And we got very inventive. We made our own ice cream that didn't have dairy in it. We made our own popsicles. We made our own cheese. Now you can buy all this stuff, but remember that it's got a lot of additives in it and sometimes artificial colors and flavors, which we're going to talk about in a second. So slow your roll and notice that it could be something that causes more problems than good. But there are ways. Back in the day, if they were having a pizza party, I had to be making stuff from scratch. Whew, hard days. But I see a lot of people now that are just living on this gluten-free, casein-free stuff that a lot of it is not ideal. It's not nutritious. So be careful about that. We want good nutrition at the end of the day. All right. And you can be on a very nutritious diet on gluten-free, casein-free, just it's not the processed stuff. All right. Let's talk for a second about Finegold. Finegold, one of the big tenets of this is that artificial colors and artificial flavors are bad for your child. And I really think that's true. I think that there are a lot of artificial colors and flavors that we still have in the United States that we allow, that the FDA allows. And yet, if you were in any other country in Europe, they would tell you that is not good. That's a petroleum product. You should not be feeding that to your child. That has no business being in a child's product. And yet, our FDA is allowing it. I don't really understand that. But you have a choice. You don't have to buy the stuff. And I think in the beginning, when a parent is talking to me about what should I try diet-wise, I always say, please start with removing all of the artificial colors and flavors and get your child as low pesticide as possible. I say that before the gluten-free, casein-free diet all the time, because to me, I really honestly feel, and I'm someone who's saying that I feel that the tantrums were reduced by the casein-free diet and that language was increased by not having the gluten. And yet I'm going to tell you that I think the pesticides and the artificial colors and flavors were the first most important thing to do. And part of it is, I think that if you get rid of the artificial colors and flavors first, but while not taking away other foods from your child, you'll get better buy-in from your child because they'll start to feel better and they'll be less triggered when you're removing other things from their diet. I think it just makes it easier. I also think that the artificial colors and flavors, they, it's that Spurlock effect that, I don't know if you've seen the documentary that he had, Super Size Me, where it kind of feeds on itself. And if you're used to tasting artificial colors and flavors, then that's what you crave and you want more of it. Whereas if you take it out, you start to taste other things and they taste good. So I think it's important to get rid of the artificial colors and flavors. And there's a bunch of research on this being something that artificial colors and flavors can lead to behaviors, extreme tantrums, dysregulation, and difficulties with focusing. All kind of sound like ADHD, autism symptoms, right? So get rid of those. And I say do that first. But the other part of the Finegold diet is that it's low salicylate. Now, I want to say that we did this for a period of time because we felt that it was important for a reset. I don't know that we got the reset from it, but salicylates are in things like apples and tomatoes. And we saw that my son, whenever he would eat any of that stuff, he would get that red ring around his mouth because it was like burning the skin. But we also saw that he was gastrointestinally being affected by it as well. So we did take those things out of his diet. There were no grapes, there were no apples, tomatoes. I'm trying to think what else. But those were kind of the big ones that were kind of a bummer for the age that he was at. And so we took those out for probably a year, maybe, and then slowly added them back in. And he ceased having a problem with them when we added them back in. But all the other things were already gone. So I don't know whether his system had a chance to recover or if it wasn't that big of a bang for the buck. But we did stop having the red ring around the mouth when he was eating those things. So I always say that he was on kind of a modified Finegold, and because Finegold can be pretty strict. There's also a reduction in just plain sugar in the Finegold diet, which I think is beneficial for our kids as well, because a certain amount of sugar is not evil. I think that artificial food colors and flavors are evil, but sugar is not evil, but it should only be had in such a small amount, and our culture just wants to put so much more in it. I know it tastes good. And we want our kids to be happy, but we want them to be happy in the long term. Okay, let's move on to the next one. The specific carbohydrate diet. Now, this is a low carb, no dairy, no processed foods diet. So after we went gluten-free and casein-free and we were on the modified Finegold, we found that we got to a place where we were stuck. And my son was still having a lot of gastro issues. We had made a certain amount of progress, but we kind of had flatlined. That everything that they were doing with him, he was maintaining beautifully, but he had been soaring. He'd been learning so much so quickly. And then it just kind of, we weren't losing anything, but we wanted more. And we came to understand that our son, he still was in that mode where he would just burst out laughing over nothing. And on the one hand, you go, well, I want my child to be really happy, but I mean, like literally like drunk, like sitting on the floor, and he would keel over and laugh. And I started asking questions about yeast and yeast overgrowth. And we eventually arrived at the specific carbohydrate diet. Now, it's not the only yeast buster protocol, and we were doing other things for the yeast as well. But really brought home to me, we were at the pool one day because there was a pool in our HOA. And one of the things that I would do to get my son to get out of the pool is that I would talk about what we were going to have for dinner. And I said, okay, 5-minute warning, because we're going to go home and we're going to have, chicken. We're going to have chicken tenders that I would make myself that were coated in, a gluten-free breadcrumb and then fried up. And I said, so we're going to have, chicken fingers, and we're going to have mashed potatoes, and we're going to have corn. And because these were all of his favorite things. We were going to have corn on the cob, and it was like one other thing. And the person in the pool who was just a neighbor was like, oh, he likes to eat white things. And I went, what? Those aren't white. I mean, corn is not white. And she was like, well, it is on the inside. Right. And I was like, and potatoes are not white. And she was like, well, they are on the inside, and that the chicken is white on the inside. She's like, he's eating a lot of white stuff. And I talked to somebody about it afterwards, and they were like, yeah, and it's all carb. Like, you took the chicken, which isn't a carb, and you dipped it in stuff to make it a carb. And the potato's a carb, and the corn's a carb. And where's the balance in all of this? And I started to notice that that's all my child was eating were white carbs. And anytime our kids are only eating a class of food, it's a problem. And it might very well be that they're having a minute, but still an allergic reaction to that food, which doesn't make sense, right? We go, but they eat it constantly. It's the thing that they want to eat. It's the thing that they crave. Yeah, but because it's a problem. And when you can get into that mindset, you go, okay, how am I going to look at this? So I read a book about the specific carbohydrate diet, and we decided to give it a real good try. I want to put an asterisk here and say that I think it's really important, if you're going to do this one, that you be working closely with a medical professional. Because I was warned about this, and we did come to the day when my child went into ketosis. And I think that is something that you should be very concerned about. My child's breath was constantly, it smelled like brandy, and his feet smelled really good. They smelled like fresh baked bread because he had so much yeast. But as we got to the point where with the specific carbohydrate diet, we broke the yeast, then I remember there was one day that we woke up and his breath smelled really bad. And that's when you know that the individual is in ketosis. And I do not think we should be having our children be in ketosis. If your medical professional wants you to do that for very specific reasons, that's between the two of you. But I would be very careful with this one, because your child can get into ketosis. And I personally do not espouse that. But for this one, it means take no potatoes. There's no carbs whatsoever. So there's no bread, there's no dairy. So in a way, it's already gluten-free, casein-free, right? But it takes it one step further, and you would not be having anything that's processed. You wouldn't be having anything that's sugar. You wouldn't be having anything that has artificial colors and flavors, because that would mean that it was processed, right? So it was a lot of eating whole food things. In the beginning, for the low specific carbohydrate, there were no rice, right? Because that's a carb, but you can work your way back up to that. So it was a lot of, and not very much fruit either. So it's a lot of vegetables, and it's a lot of meat. Now, my son loves meat, so that was not a problem, but I don't necessarily know that that's a great thing either. And what we saw was that his cholesterol went up on this diet. So we did break the yeast, and that was a great thing. And we slowly put back in the fruit and vegetables. But so this one is a possibility, but big asterisk. I wouldn't do this without working with a professional closely, that somebody, you tell the pediatrician, we're going to try this diet, and I just need to know that you're on speed dial should I need you, right? Let's be very careful, because we want to stay healthy. And there is a possibility with really extreme low carb that you can get to the point where it isn't healthy anymore. All right, so let's move on. I think the next one is keto. Okay, and keto is sort of like the specific carbohydrate, but it allows dairy. So it's very low carb, including fruit. You would not be having the tart, the picture of there. Now, why do some kiddos get put on a keto diet? And I think it's mostly teens in the past that this has been recommended, but it has been shown to be pretty effective if you have a kiddo who's having seizures. And for those of you who are dealing with seizures, you know what I'm talking about. It's like you would try other things. Now, I would have said to you 2 months ago, I wouldn't do a keto diet with a child who's not having seizures, because the low carb thing scares me. Your child is trying to build muscle and bone, and being low carbohydrate and high fat often is what the keto diet can end up being, is a little bit daunting for me. But we just had Julie Matthews on the show and saw that there was a pretty big benefit for individuals on the spectrum with a keto diet. I want to say I want a little bit more research on this, because I want to say, is it because we wiped out sugar? Is it because because we can just take sugar out, but you can still have other carbs? So I want to urge caution with this one, but it has been shown to be very effective. If you're dealing with seizures, talk with your doctor about the keto diet for your child of any age and see if it can't be of benefit to you, but do it with a medical professional. Okay, on to the next one, which I think is the GAPS diet. Okay, so the GAPS diet is really about healing when things have gotten really off the chart, not okay. And I can tell you that because I've done the GAPS diet for a period of, I think, like 4 months. Oh my gosh, it's intensive. First of all, it is for the first week to month, it's really a liquid diet of bone broth, and that's it. Which I know some people who have had to put their children on the GAPS diet because of severe gastrointestinal stuff. But again, you would never put a child on this without working with a direct professional. And most pediatricians would never sign off on this, right? So you would need to be working with someone who is either a MedMaps doctor or a specialist, a nutritionist who understands your child. Big cautionary thing. I also want to say that as an adult doing this, because I was in a place where I needed some gut healing and I wanted to experience what this was like so that I could talk with parents about it. I will tell you that the parents who are really into the GAPS diet tell me, oh, their child made so much improvement. But these are kiddos who have ulceration in their intestines, right? Where they are not being able to handle whole food. If your child is not at that level, I personally would not be trying the GAPS diet, because I know as an adult to go on a completely liquid diet of bone broth, like that is an intense way to live. And now you can buy bone broth in the store. It's a little processed, but it also was intensive to cook the things for it, because basically you were cooking like 2 pots of broth on the stove at all times. It was a lot, my friends, a lot. This is not for the faint of heart. And then gradually what you do is over time, you start adding other things back in. Most of the time, if you really look at the true GAPS diet, they want you to set aside 2 years to slowly reintroduce foods to your intestines. And that's a long time. Like, I can't picture sending a child off to do 2nd grade with a thing of bone broth. I just, they're going to be in the bathroom a lot. I can't see it. I can't picture it. And then still, there's absolutely no grain on the GAPS diet. So eventually you're making things like nut breads. And let me tell you, after you haven't eaten solid food for 2 weeks, a little nut bread loaf seems like the greatest thing on the face of the planet. I would not do this to a child unless you have severe gastro issues, and then I would be working with a doctor about it, okay? And then I think our last one is the low oxalate diet. And this is the one that I know the least about, only because we have not done this in our family. But it is to reduce oxalates in your body. So it's things like beans, nuts, soy, etc., that are not allowed. There is none of that. So there's a lot of things like, specific carbohydrate and keto overlap each other in a lot of different ways, except that the keto allows the dairy products. The low oxalate is sort of the outlier. There's a whole bunch of foods in it that you cannot have on the other diets. So it was a period of time when low oxalate was really, really, really popular. And then I think people just did not see the results from it that they had hoped. And so it went by the wayside. You can still look it up and find if that interests you. And I'm trying to think, and if you guys can write in about any other diets that you may or may not be interested in. There are plenty of times when, there have been specific protocols for certain things. It's sort of like, the fad, right? That over the years, we've seen different protocols for yeast that involve diet. But almost all of them pare down to be some combo of the first few that I showed you. That, a gluten-free, casein-free diet, taking out the pesticides, but also taking out the artificial food and colors and flavors like Finegold, taking out some measure of processed food, taking out some measure of sugar, especially processed sugar. So if we think about this, and as we go to our last slide here, my reminder to everybody that everyone is different and that it's important to be happy and healthy. That is critical. And food is love, so it makes it really hard, right? That on the one hand, there are some things that, let's just take an example of, I love banana cream pie. Oh my gosh, I think that banana cream pie is one of the great, great joys in life. And I don't know why everybody doesn't love banana cream pie and want to have it on a daily basis. Well, okay, I'm allergic to wheat. I'm allergic now to dairy, and I am horribly allergic now to bananas, like go to the emergency room. So I'm not going to eat banana cream pie again in my life, unless it's the very last day and we want to kill me. Do you know what I'm saying? And, that's a bummer. There's a hand cream that smells like banana cream pie. And occasionally I like to visit the store in the mall where I can smell it. I don't keep it around because it's torturous to have it too much around. But, to smell it and be like, yes, I remember that from my past. Sometimes when we decide that a food isn't good for our children in the moment, they're in that mode of, I want it, and I don't understand why I can't have it. Why can't I have the black jelly beans? Well, the black jelly beans have this food coloring in it, and every time we give it to you, you are inconsolable an hour later. Somebody has to be the adult and say, we're not giving the black jelly beans to this child anymore. The thing is, it's really hard to know. And that when you're in the space of, I don't know what is setting my child off, it's hard to make decisions and it's hard to deny them something when you're like, I just don't know. That's why I think it's important to be open and willing to try things in a kind and gentle way that isn't about automatic, overnight, everything is different. So if we start with the pesticide one, your child should not even know that you've done it. It might mean not going to a certain drive-through, and that they'll notice, but the food that you actually put in front of them should not look or feel or taste any different. It might taste better, like my husband with the milk, right? So I think that that's an easy one. Then the artificial color and flavor, if there are things that your child has been eating that are very specific, like I know everybody's into those yogurts now. Oh gosh. That's a convenience food that your child would eat. And if you are into the yogurts, I want you to look at the yogurt and go, what is in this? And if it's not organic, there's 100% pesticides in it. If it's got sugar in it, like whatever health benefit it was for your child, it's basically empty calories. And if it's milk in general, that may not be the best thing for your child. For that, it's going to be rough. If they are living on those little squeezable yogurts that the kids love so much, you're not going to be able to find a comparison to that. You're going to have to disrupt their life a little bit. But I always say distraction. Distraction is the best way to change diet. It's the best way to change anything, right? That I think of my friend who couldn't get her kids to eat vegetables. And they went on a Disney vacation. And I think they were at Alani. And there was one thing that one of her kids ate every single day, and they didn't have it. They just didn't have it at the resort. They didn't have that one thing. What was she going to do? Leave the resort and go, shop around Hawaii to look for the one particular? It was like, no, this is what they have. And she wasn't defensive about it. There wasn't a big lecture. She was like, I'm sorry, they just don't have it. But there were other things that they had. And by the end of the week, she said, it's not that my kids don't like vegetables. My kids ate so many vegetables, and they ate fresh fruits, and they ate all these things. But I believe the whole thing about that's the only thing that they'll eat. They tell me it's the only thing they'll eat. So I buy it, and it becomes this treadmill of, so of course it's the only thing they eat because that's what I bought. So take your children on a vacation for 2 days and oopsie, forget the thing and we're just going to have to try something else. And if they have emotion about it, let them have emotion about it. It's not forever. It's trying something new. See if you can, and you don't have to go on a vacation and go, to Hawaii to do that. You can go on a day trip. You can pack a backpack filled with whatever it is. And you can go, as our guest on Monday said, go take a forest trip and go, walk in nature. And we have the stuff in the backpack, and there is no grocery store. Your child will have the feelings that they have, but it's amazing what kids will eat when they're hungry. Absolutely. I always tell the story about going to IKEA one day, and I didn't bring the diaper bag, and my son was starving, just starving. And I ordered him something, and I think I ordered him 2 eggs, and I ordered a big plate of vegetables for myself, steamed vegetables, and went to sit down and eat them. And my child was jamming the vegetables into his mouth. And somebody came up to me. They're like, how do you get a child? Because he was probably 1.5. She was like, how do you get a child to eat like that? I said, he's hungry. He's just hungry, and it's what's in front of him. So try it. You don't have to take my word for it. Look up your Dirty Dozen, your Clean 15. Put some fresh cut up vegetables and fruits in your house. There's that witching time of the afternoon when kids get hungry. They want a snack. Their little bodies need a snack before dinner, and you don't want to ruin dinner. If what you put out during that time is healthy fruit and vegetables, not processed stuff, nothing that I would say put out the rainbow in colors, right? You don't need to buy the artificial colors. You can buy strawberries right now, except you can't, organic ones. Hopefully you can by now. But buy whatever is organic, put it out, and you will be amazed. If your children are hungry, they'll stuff it in their faces. There are some things that they won't. It's not true of all kids and of all things, but try it. Be willing to try different things and put them out and see what happens so that you can move into a better time, a better diet, because what we want truly is for our kids to be as healthy as possible. That's really what we want. And if something that they're eating is causing them gastrointestinal pain or to feel foggy as if they have had an alcoholic beverage, this is not how we would send our kids to school. And if it's creating a reality in which it's hard for them to focus, which I truly believe that the artificial colors and flavors and the pesticides absolutely are doing, we would not want that. All right, that's my topic for today. I hope that you found something that's useful for you and that you will enjoy your food with your kiddos. We've got some amazing best ofs coming up for you for the rest of this week, and then we are back on Monday. So I hope that you enjoyed this talk while I'm with my son enjoying his birthday. Thank you guys all for being here. We will let you know what's happening all of next week, but it's good shows. We've got great things coming up for you in the month of June. So don't want to miss that. We will see you back here tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.